That's crazy.
Can you, we need a fourth for our DOE meeting. Is it possible for you to join by Zoom?
All right. Let's see
Okay, all right, thank you.
here. Testing.
Want to use mine?
It's better to get to the Wi-Fi part.
John. Doug is tied up in contract negotiations. I don't have, I've called Sig and text message, but I have never from him.
We will
warm.
They're down to 40 today.
What about Adam?
He's
I guess he's okay.
Microphone is live, so just heads up there.
and we sent the,
He sent out yesterday.
Yeah, he's back there. On one side, I think the whole thing just shifted over like 18 inches. Everything sideways.
And I guess Brian checked the YouTube audio. The picture's not showing, but the audio is still fine.
There's a garden side upstairs, Marcus.
We'll take a look at
Yeah,
it.
no problem.
Try to see. I think it's just a step.
It's the same. It's only connect to the deck. Or the neck to the deck, he doesn't think. Just tell him what to do. He's happy about it.
Right.
Sailor turn my good.
okay, we want to, we need to call in for SIG.
She can call the conference line 6599 443 6599. And the link should have been sent to her as well.
So what does she need?
Yeah, I'm not gonna go.
443 6599
907.
443 6599.
Technology stuff.
Yes, I did. Left about 2 o'clock, so we had to go deal with things.
Yeah, but I don't think the other ones are, I think the agenda says until 9:30. Like this guy.
I asked them because I was just.
Maybe Cam's buying dinner.
Yeah, I could split my
Here we are.
half of my wrap that I got.
You prepared.
It sounds like
I
Hi,
ate
who do we have
freaking-
on the line?
Hi, TikTok talk. Hi, Steve. Should I use the team?
Up to you.
You can use either SIG. It's what, if you want to use the phone, it depends on what your connection, you feel your connection capability is.
Okay, I'll just stay on the phone.
Hello, this is Dan Pardee with Northern Sound Health Corporation.
Okay, so you're on the phone,
Use Teams.
Teams. SIG, are you on the phone yet?
Yeah,
All right. Okay.
yeah.
All right, John just stepped out for a second. He'll be right back. Oh, there's puppy food and apples, right? Or you can chew on.
Which is whatever. Yep.
Okay,
We're all set.
okay, sounds good. The time is 5:40. Call the Nome Board of Equalization to order. Today is Wednesday, May 31, 2023. And we're meeting in City Council chambers here at City Hall in Nome. Council sits as the Board of Equalization. And Mr. Clerk, would you call a roll of the members to determine a quorum?
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Doug Johnson is excused. Mark Johnson.
Here.
Adam Martinson is excused. Councilmember Piscoya.
Here.
Councilmember Topcock.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Already did.
Okay, we have four members present, so we do have a quorum. Three are in the room and one is on the telephone. Approval of the agenda. Are we aware, in reading through these appeals, there were a number of notes that some of these things might have still got resolved today? Are any of these to be removed?
I advised Bryant that, let's see, remember, the first one, Irigu, is off the list.
Okay.
The West, number 2 appeal is off the.
Okay.
And then dropping down to the second page, Nicholas Tackett, Anna
Matungan?
and Peter Hansen is at the bottom of page 2. Those three are off. And then on the third page, Hansen, Trigg, Luce, and Hobson are off.
Okay, we have different page numbers here, Arnie, so let's just start at the beginning
I'm
here.
sorry.
So, A, Irigu is off, B, West is off.
I'll go by alphabetical again.
Okay, that would be super.
Okay, so let me get my pages. So, then M, N, O, P, Q. S and V. V is in Victor.
Okay.
So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 removals.
Okay, thank you. So is there a motion to approve the agenda? Removal of A, B, M, N, O, P, Q, S, and V.
I'll make the motion. Okay.
Thank you, Member Henderson, Member Mark Johnson. Roll call, please.
Member Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Member Piscoya.
Yes.
Member Topcock.
Yes.
Member Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Moving on to citizens' comments. Are there those in the audience that would like to address the council? If you're here to speak to an appeal that is on the agenda, you will be afforded time at the time your appeal is up for consideration. Okay, seeing no indication, we'll move on to unfinished business then. And the first appeal coming before the board today is on page 7 of the packet. This is for tax lot 001.261.18, owner James Messer. And Mr. Sesser, would you speak to the status?
Mr. Messer felt that an adjustment downward was in order. His total assessed value this year was $153,500. I recommended denial as he has a deed of trust existing that was initiated a year ago for $184,000, which I feel more than supports the current assessed value.
Thank you. Is Mr. Messer or a representative of the appellant in the audience? Seeing none, we will then proceed based on the information that is provided to us. Do council members have any questions of the assessor? Member Henderson.
I just assume that because you indicated there was a deed of trust for $184,000, that your assumption is that the homeowner obtained a loan for at least $184,000.
Yes.
So the valuation would.
Probably a
at least that or
refinancing.
greater than
Yes.
$184,000.
Sir.
Support your assessment. That was just clarification, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Okay, we are going to go ahead and consider take action on each of these appeals as they come forth. And then Brooks Chandler, who represents the Board of Equalization, Charles is here on behalf of the administration. Two separate attorneys, two separate parts to this process. And then Mr. Chandler will draft the necessary findings of facts and conclusions that then will be adopted at other meeting. All motions must be in the affirmative. So for this, although the recommendation is that it be denied, the motion would be to grant the appeal. And then if you agree with the recommendation, it would be a no vote. So is there a motion with regard to tax lot 001.261.18 to grant the appeal? Yes.
So you do need a motion
Correct.
regardless of the decision.
Correct.
Just to get.
I have a question also before we make the motion.
Go ahead.
So it's not required for the appellant to come to this hearing if they choose not to.
That is correct.
It's an option for them if they want to.
That is correct.
Okay.
So I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Member Henderson,
Second.
Member Mark Johnson, is there any further discussion?
Clarification, once again, that the motion is
To grant the appeal, and the recommended action is to deny it. With the recommended action, it would be a no vote. So a roll call, please, on the matter of tax lot 001.261.18.
Member Mark Johnson,
no.
member Pescoya,
No.
member Topcott,
No.
member Henderson.
Thank you. That motion fails. The decision of the assessor as it was issued stands. That moves us on to Centurion, item D, which is at page 9. This is for tax lot 001.181.22, which is block 90, lot 3, street address of 607 Stedman. Mr. Assessor.
Yes, so my name is Martin Sonskoulis. I'm one of the assessors working with Arnie, helping Arnie these couple of days. So Arnie met with property owner last week, discussed the appeal, and the basis for the appeal or concerns that property owner mentioned in his appeal was that the property is not finished. It's currently under construction. Interior has been fully stripped. Cannot live in the house currently. There's no heat, no water, sewer. So Arnie reviewed the property, adjusted percent complete. Percent complete is comes from Marshall and Swift Construction Report Manual. Um, And based on the adjustment, Ani recommends adjusting value to 247,500. So the original value was 266,200, and it's been adjusted to 247,500. And we tried to contact property owner via cell phone yesterday and today as well. I know the city has been also trying to contact property owner. We left voicemail a couple of times, but we have not heard back from property owner. So the recommended value is 247,500 for the whole property.
Thank you. This property owner was present at the last meeting when we convened and noted the time that the board would be meeting again. So the party was on notice of the meeting. I do not see the representative in. Is there a motion to concur with the assessor's decision to leave the land value as it is at 48,100 and reduce the building from 218,100 to 199,400 for a initial total of 266,200 and a revision of 247,500. So in this particular motion that is being requested for consideration or being entertained, if the agreement is to reduce the value in accordance with the assessor's recommendation, the vote would be yes to grant it.
Do you want us to ask questions after the motion?
Yeah, if we could get the motion on the table first.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember. Member Henderson. Member Mark Johnson. Member Henderson.
Question on the, and the homeowner was present at the inspection? Or the on-site visit?
He was, and also I met with him last Wednesday, early afternoon. And also at that time reiterated that we would.
So just, it looks like you did a percentage of completion inspection, just to.
I did,
because it was done
yes.
construction. And looking, I'm assuming the initial assessment was based on the assumption that the project was 100% complete.
Yes.
Looking at the reduction, which is about 19,000 roughly, was it your assessment that the project was about 90% complete?
No, actually, the project is probably about 45% complete. It is a shell. It open stud interior, and that's it. It has the windows and doors, and I believe when I calculated it, it was at about 42%. 42% normally is enclosed with windows and doors and the siding.
So my question is if it's 42% complete, shouldn't that translate to 42% roughly of the original assessed value, which is assuming 100% completion? Or is there another way that you look at that? Because basically, it looks like you reduced the improvements by roughly 10%. And based on only 40%, again, unless there's something I'm not understanding, asking more of a clarification.
I don't have last year's assessment in front of me, so I can't specifically answer your question of
So,
what we were carrying it at
well, I was.
previous year, but
So your original assessment, according to the,
okay, last year when Martins and I picked it up, we had an improvement value of 30,600. And then we I guess you could say, assumed that it would be much farther along this year. And it was valued at, and actually it was carried at 42% complete when the assessment came out. So,
So,
and I reduced it to,
so the question is so the 218,100 that you had with your initial, oh,
No calculation there.
so I further reduced it roughly 9% from the assessment.
so I'm looking at page 11, which is the decision for the recommendation. The original, based on that, the initial assessment of the improvements was 218,100. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that was based on an assumed 42% completion and not 100% completion.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. No more questions.
Thank you. Member
So,
Johnson?
point of clarification, you mentioned that when we made the motion, it was to grant, grant the appeal, or to grant the decision, the decision that the assessor made, this final decision on the 247.5.
Correct.
So what about the initial appeal? That homeowner put on there.
The initial appeal, I think what you're getting at is the initial appeal was evaluated at 98,100.
Correct.
And so the assessor has said to value it at 247,500. The question is,
It's either that we're accepting the owner's estimate in number 2, or we're accepting the assessor's decision in number 4. The assessed value, the first line is the same, and it's the difference in that the appellant suggested that it go from 218,100 to 50,000 for the building, a reduction of, what is that, $168,000.
But the first one that we worked on, the appeal was to grant the appeal of the appellant. And we voted no, not to grant that appeal. The appeal of the appellant is 98,100. And it seems like in our deliberations, we're not really considering that. We're only considering whether we're going to take the full value of 266 or the assessor's reduced value of 247.
so I guess to put it restated, are we voting on the homeowner's appeal, yes or no? Or are we voting on the assessor's recommendation, yes or no?
Okay, so with the first one, there was no change to what it had been assessed, and it stayed at the same.
I think I may have an answer to the dilemma, maybe.
Okay.
And that is that we are looking to either grant the appeal that the appellant made, or we're not gonna grant the appeal, it would go to the assessor's reduced value.
So the question you have is that if we decline the homeowner's appeal, will the assessor's recommendation stand?
Okay, let's just do 2 motions, if it comes to a thing to this, we might just make it simple. Oh, Mr. Chandler, please, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so to frame the question, the assessor's recommendation is basically testimony that you've received at the hearing today. So you make decisions based on, the information that's provided at the hearing. So technically, you would be granting the homeowner's appeal in part based on the assessor's testimony and reducing the value of the improvement on this property. So you could make a motion to grant the homeowner's appeal in part by reducing the initial assessment and kind of do it all in one motion. The property owner obviously asked for a much larger reduction, so that also is an option. You could, a motion to grant the appeal would be a motion, you'd be voting on whether to reduce the property value as initially requested by the property owner.
So can we make a motion to simply accept the assessor's recommendation? Yes or no?
You could make a motion to no, you have an appeal in front of you that you have to decide. So, and the appeal is for a much larger reduction in value. So
Let's just do it as two separate ones, Brooks, I think, just to keep, so everybody stays on the same page.
But we do have a motion on the floor, correct?
We do, so, can we take that motion back?
Then that's what my question
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Will you unsecond and unfirst? Although it belongs to the body, does the body have any objections to taking the motion off the table? Okay,
I had a further question for the assessor on the property.
okay, so let's go back to a motion on the floor first.
Okay, we have to give the emotion first.
Okay, all right, so, is there, with regard to tax lot 001.181.22, Centurion, for block 90, lot 3, is there a motion to grant the appellant's request?
I will make that motion.
Thank you. Member Henderson, Member Johnson, now question.
Question is, did you, Arnie, did you say you looked up the previous year's value? Do we know what the previous year's assessed value was?
At that time, we're still in that first Centurion one, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, and we had it, at 42% complete.
And what's the total, what's the value that it was assessed at?
At that time, it was determined that the improvement value was 30,600. Oh, wait, for this year it was 218,100 is what he appealed.
I understand that. I'm trying to ask what was last year's?
Last year's was,
Last year's was 30,600 for improvements, but that was old building, so this is new building that we picked up last fall. This is completely different building than what we had last year. So those are different values.
So we put a new building on the property?
and we moved the old.
Okay, so, any other questions on this particular? So we're voting on whether to grant, the appeal, on 001.181.22, from the assessed value of 266,200 to the owner's, requested estimated value of 98,000. Roll call, please.
Member Piscoya,
No.
Member Tucker,
Sorry, can somebody repeat? My service was cutting in and out. We're voting to grant
We're,
the owner's appeal.
we're voting on the appeal of the property owner. And then, if that, fails, then we will also have a motion to revise it based on the new recommendation, from the assessor.
Okay, thank you. No.
Member Henderson?
No.
Member Doug Johnson? Or, pardon me, Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you. So that motion fails, and along with this, we have a recommendation from the assessor to revise the original building value from 218,100 to no change to the land, which would result in a new assessment of 247,500 versus the original of 266,200. So looking for a motion to accept the change recommended by the assessor.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, Member Mark Johnson. Is there any further discussion?
So in our further discussion, do we have a right to make an amendment to change the assessor's value? And do we want to even do that?
I think we better ask Brooks. Brooks is here as our counsel.
Yes, the Board of Equalization can make a finding based on valuation. That has to be, there has to be evidence in front of you that kind of supports the finding that you're making. So if you're going to change the recommendation that the assessor testified to, then it would be important to explain the reasons why.
All right, thank you. I had a question for the assessor.
Go ahead.
It was listed as, it says the interior has been stripped and the building is unlivable with no heat, water, sewer, or electricity. Is that correct?
That is correct. I inspected the building again last Thursday.
So it's
I
basically,
met with the appellant on Wednesday afternoon after I flew in, and then early the next morning, I went to the property and the individual looked inside. It was just basically a gutted shell.
and that's where I'm having a little bit of a hard time with the improvements being at 199.4. Does it give a square footage of the property? Of the improvement?
Yes, it's 1,352 square feet.
Can I ask a question? So just to reconfirm, when you reduced your assessment down to the improvements to 199,400, that was based on the assumption of around 30-something% complete. Is that correct?
A little bit higher than that.
Around 40% or 42%. Okay, so the assessment was based on the around 40% completion. So once it's completed, that assessment will theoretically be much higher once it's completed.
Yes, it will be up, I believe, in the 300 range.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
That pencils out to me too, what you just said about 300, I got 338 approximately.
Are there further questions?
So, I'd kind of like to go in, I don't personally think it's worth 199.4 on the improvement. doing the calculation based on what I'm hearing from the assessor, it comes out to more like 142,000. But we don't have all the information as far as we're not the ones going looking at the property or anything else, but based on the fact that doesn't have any heat, water, sewer, electricity, and the assessor has said it's just a shell. That's seems like a lot of money for a shell without the other improvements with it.
Can I ask so you said earlier when you did the percentage of completion inspection, it's based on a certain set of standards, appraisal standards, is that correct? The SWIFT, I think you mentioned SWIFT.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, when you did the inspection and you assigned a percentage of completion figure as to these buildings, it's based on established appraisal principles, correct?
Yeah,
But, and you
We have it
mentioned
right in our
SWIFT
manual.
and out of, okay. So you didn't randomly pull that number out of anywhere, you
No.
used.
I have a checklist, an extensive checklist that starts with pre-construction, then excavation and backfill, plumbing, foundation and slab, and it goes on. It identifies a percentage of the completed product for each thing.
That's it, thank you.
Okay, if there are not further questions, the motion then that we're voting on is to accept the assessor's revision for the building value from 218,100 to 199,400. No change to the land value for tax lot 001.181.22. Ready for the vote? Roll call, please.
Member Pistoia.
Yes.
Member Tucker.
Here.
Member Henderson.
Yes.
Member Mark Johnson.
No,
Okay, so that we did not accept the owner's estimate and we did not accept the new estimate. So therefore, because that motion failed, so the tax value for this property remains at $218,100, $48,000 for the land, for a total of $266,200. That brings us on.
so point of clarification, so you have to have all four votes affirmative
Correct.
to or to go through. So the first one, we had 3 and 1
We had
That
three,
failed
we had
also?
3 on 1 on what?
on the granting the appeal of the ninth appellant's,
The last motion.
the first motion of this particular.
Okay, I guess read me back the roll call then, I guess. I'm sorry, I misheard it. Or for clarification, who voted no? You?
No, actually, I voted yes. The motion was to accept the appellant's appeal value.
Okay, and everybody else voted no.
Right.
Okay, so I guess at that point, the owner's value was not accepted. And so it reverted to the value as assessed. So I believe that that's correct.
Yes, that is. The, both revisions, the one requested by the owner and the one testified to by the assessor, have not been accepted. Therefore, the original assessment value is your decision.
Thank you. So the second vote that was taken on this matter was in error and should be reflected as such in the minutes. Moving on then to the next item we have is E at page 12. This is for property 190.1.041, lot 2D at Willow Ridge subdivision, appellant Doug Martinson. The
Pages.
12. Well, just a minute here.
Those are wrong numbers, all
Because
those are
this
wrong.
was not matched to this.
Yeah, so these are wrong numbers. These are after exemption, so he has $50,000 exemption. That's the file I have here. Yes, so
Okay,
that's a full value.
this is the full value.
That's the full value. This one is after exemption.
Okay, the clarification that I was asking on is that in the application or the appeal form, section 2 of the values listed as the assessor's values do not match to the ones on page number 4. And the difference is $150,000. There's a $150,000 state exemption for a senior citizen using it as their primary residence. And so the numbers that were utilized in section 2 that was worked into it, so those are not the numbers to be considered. The actual assessment that was issued was for $58,400 for land. The building, $1,024,900 for a total of $1,083,300. So the property owner did ask for a reduction regardless of taking, imputing that state deal. But when we go to number 4, we'll ask the assessor to explain his rationale for no change.
Yes, so Arnie did meet with the property owner, discuss the appeal. A couple days later, Arnie asked me to look at the values, look at how the property is assessed. And so once property owners are appealing, so your appeal starts with what you submit to the city. And in this case, I did not see, and the burden of proof is also on the property owner. So in this case, I did not see anything that would support any adjustments in assessed value. A couple of things that property owner mentions in his appeal is too high of an increase and no improvements made, which is pretty much what we see in the majority of all appeals. And those are really not basis for any adjustments. We did look at the property as well. Did not see any damage or anything that would again support any adjustments. So based on that, we recommend no change in assessed values. And property owner also in his recommended values included values that are prior to exemption, and we only use values that are. He included values that are after exemption, and we only use values that are prior to exemption. And after that, all the exemptions are being applied. So in this case, again, based on appeal, we recommend no change in assessed value. So the value of 58,400 for the land and 1,024,900 for the buildings, and a total value of 1,083,300 should remain the same. Just because I don't think owner has provided any information that would support any change in assessed value. Thank you.
Yes, just to go based on the rough calculation of the difference between the assessed value as the appellant wrote it and what the recommendation was, it was essentially asking for a 15% reduction. Please.
Arnie, maybe you could explain, because a lot of something, and maybe it's a general assessment principle, that a lot of the appellants have indicated in their appeals that they haven't made any improvements. And I know we've talked in the past about that's not a factor that you consider in your assessments if there hasn't been no improvements to the property. But we see that on a lot of appeals. Can you explain that? Because this will be, broadcast on, and could you kind of explain that?
I think it's kind of a misunderstanding on the part of the appellants. They're thinking that we have determined that they have, since the last assessment year, have added to their homes, improved it further than it already was. The term improvement is used throughout most communities to identify anything on the property that is not the land. Like the well, the septic, and those things would all be improvements. So, and a basic question I always ask them, well, if you have made no improvements, will you sell it to me for what you purchased it for? Because you tell me you have made no improvements. But anyway, yes, they are misinterpreting, I think, the word improvement. And we discussed this after last meeting among us, that could we use a different term instead of improvement? But I think most people think, well, they actively think I added on to my house or did something that would increase its value just based on that, rather than inflation or, as I spoke last month, about the market factors.
So again, just for clarification, I think you've made the point several times that when you see that on appeals of I didn't make any improvements to my property, therefore my assessment should not increase, you don't consider that as part of the valuation process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. But however, you do look at depreciation and age and overall condition of properties as a possible reduction to the original assessment value.
Exactly. And then we also look what's called the sales ratio.
I just wanted to get that on the record because we've had a lot of questions about that very topic. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess
Make a motion to grant the appeal. We don't have the motion on the floor yet.
okay, we don't, and I guess we don't know what the value of it is because these numbers are erroneous. I guess we just add $150,000 to each line. So, to put the 150K back on there, the appellant is, requesting that the assessment go from 1,083,300 to 949,700. Is there a motion to grant this appeal?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I thought Mark made the motion.
Second.
However it was, Mark, Councilmember, or Member Johnson and Member Henderson. Further discussion?
Clarification, just so we're clear on what the motion is. Can you read back the motion?
The motion is to grant the appeal of the appellant, appeal, the taxpayer's appeal, to reduce the assessment from what it was assessed at $1,083,300 to $949,700. And testimony from the assessor, recommending no change. Roll call, please.
Member Topcock,
No.
Member Henderson,
No.
Member Mark Johnson,
No.
Member Piscoya.
No.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item F, which is tax law 190.1.030A, lot 1D in Willow Ridge subdivision. The appellant has requested a building value reduction so that the total assessed value goes from $429,000 to $377,000. Mr. Assessor.
Yes, so this appeal is, it's exactly the same one as we just reviewed, that there's, I didn't feel there's really basis for any adjustment based on, the only fact that the property owner mentioned is too high of an increase and no improvements made. Those are not really basis to adjust the value. And, we recommend no change in assessed value, so the assessed value should remain the same. And, that would be $31,200 for land, $397,800 for the buildings, and $429,000 for total value. Thank you.
Thank you. So with regard to this tax lot, is there a motion to grant the appeal?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Member Henderson, Member Piscoya, discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Henderson.
No.
Member Mark Johnson.
No.
Member Piscoya.
No.
Member Topcock.
No.
Thank you. 4 votes, the motion fails. That brings us then to item G for tax lot 001.181.20. Centurion LLC owner, block 119, lot 3, commonly known as 608 East D Street. The assessment for land was $48,400, the building at $989,000, for a total of $1,037,400. The appellant did not contest the land value and estimated the building value at $830,900 for a total of $879,300. Mr. Assessor.
So it's a similar appeal, again, that the two things that the property owner was concerned with was that the appeal was, not the appeal, but the assessed value for this year was too high of an increase and no improvements made. Again, those are not based for the appeal. If you look at the properties, we didn't feel that there's enough information, that there's not enough information that would support any changes for the value, so we recommend no change for the value for land for 48,400. Building value remains the same, 989,000, and the total value of 1,037,400. So no change in the value.
Thank you. With regard to property 001.181.20, is there a motion to grant the appellant's appeal request?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Member Henderson, member Mark Johnson, is there any discussion? Not a roll call, please, on this property 001.181.20.
Member Mark Johnson?
No.
Member Piscoya?
No.
Member Topcock?
No.
Member Henderson?
No.
Thank you. 4 votes on that. The motion fails to grant the relief requested. That brings us to page 21, property tax lot 190.1.030, which is lot 1C, commonly known as 105 Irish, by Centurion LLC. The total assessed value that was determined was $585,100. The appellant made no change to the land, but reduced the building value estimate from $553,900 to $406,600. Mr. Assessor.
For this appeal, again, the concerns from the property owner was that too high of an increase in the value and also no improvements made, which are not based for any change in the assessed value. And based on review, we didn't find that there's enough information submitted to grant any changes. So the land value remains the same, 31,200, building value 553,900, and the total value no change, 585,100.
Thank you. Is there a motion to grant the appeal with regard to tax lot 190.1.030?
Motion.
Second.
Member Henderson, member Piscoya, is there any discussion? Could I have a roll call, Mr. Clerk, please, on the motion?
Member Mark Johnson?
No.
Member Piscoya?
No.
Member Topcock?
No.
Member Henderson?
Thank you. 4 votes, the motion fails. That brings us to item I, also by Centurion. This is tax lot 001.111.26, lot 9, block 70, commonly known as 606 East 5th Avenue. The total assessment issued was $517,800. The owner estimated the value at $455,300. That he did not change the land value that reduced the building from 479,300 to 416,800. Mr. Assessor, would you speak to this appeal request?
Similar concerns for this appeal, again, too high of an increase, no improvements made. And I kind of forgot to mention in the previous appeals that the owner's estimated value is just the value that we had last year. So it was that's the base for the owner's estimate value, that there shouldn't be any change from last year. And for this case, again, we didn't find that there's enough information that would support any changes in assessed value. So we recommend values remain the same for the land at 38,500, building values 479,300, and the total value of 517,800.
Thank you. In regard to tax lot 001.111.26, is there a motion to grant the appeal requested?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Member Henderson, member Mark Johnson, is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Bisway,
No.
member Tucker,
no,
member Henderson.
No.
Member Mark Johnson.
No.
Thank you. So with 4 votes, that motion fails. Next item is item J by Ryan Martinson for tax lot 001.271.21, lot 2A, block 22 of Nome, commonly known as 617 Nome. The assessment that was submitted was for $254,200. The owner is estimating and appealing for a total tax of $57,000. No change to the land value of $7,000, but reducing the building from $247,200 to $50,000. Mr. Assessor.
Since there's another percentage of completion. Again, I met with the appellant last week, and then I went by the property several times and looked at it. I had anticipated from the last time that we reviewed it last year that there would be some advancement in the percentage of completion, and I recalculated the completion of the structure, reduced the value, or recommended that the value be reduced to $125,500, or roughly what we estimate is going to be about, 36% of what the finished cost would be.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, the new assessment or the recommended assessment of 132,500 is based on a 36% percentage of completion. What was the original assumption in terms of percentage of completion? 254,200. I assume that's not assumed to be 100% completed.
No, the,
Something different.
the anticipated,
That was original.
we had calculated the total worth of the building at $349,78, and we thought at that point it represented 50% completion. And when I went back and went through the itemized percentages and everything with what I was seeing on the ground, I felt that it was at about 36% complete.
So the change in assessment from the original assessment to the recommended assessment basically went from 50% to 36%.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm very to screw this one up, so I think we're still gonna try two motions. The first one, to grant, the request, and then, depending on the outcome of that, potentially a second motion to adjust the value from, based on assessor recommendation. So the first motion is to grant the appeal for tax lot 001.271.21.
I'll make a motion.
For Henderson, member Mark Johnson. Any discussion?
So just to clarify, if this motion fails,
If this motion fails, it reverts to the 254,200.
But then we have a second motion to accept the assessor's reduced value.
Correct.
So I just want to clarify a question we're under discussion, right?
Yes.
So the homeowner says about the report estimates ability to be 50% complete. The assessor went there and determined that that wasn't quite right. That was more like 36%.
Yeah.
Yes, the homeowner says that it's maybe 20% because it's not closed in with exterior doors, without all the windows, and without any. Does it have no roofing on it?
It has the subroof, it doesn't have a finished roof.
I got you. It has.
And that was the correction I had to make from before it was listed as having been, it's a shed roof, that it had been completed with the exterior covering of metal, and that wasn't the case. It just looked like with the tar paper or whatever he had on the roof, that it had a completed roof, but it did not.
And then in this process, you provide the homeowner your reduction, your adjustment down to 132.5, which he did not accept. Is that correct?
He did not respond.
Did not respond. Okay.
You know, that's-
Okay.
All these 7 appeals, we contacted, or attempted to contact them several times, saying, well, one, the Board of Equalization begins Wednesday nights, and please call regarding your appeal.
I have a question. As part of this appeal process, you've gone in and made some adjustments to your percentage of completion inspections. Sounds like you use checklists. Are you able to provide a copy of that to the homeowner so that they can be more?
If they ask, yes, one homeowner that appealed said, may I see a copy of the Mars worksheet? That's the electronic system by which we've had. So it listed out each improvement on their property, the percentage, the unit cost per square foot cost, everything.
They can get a copy of it. All they need to do is.
We're happy to provide any of that. It's all public information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further? Otherwise, the motion is to grant the appeal on, requested by the taxpayer for lot 001.271.21. I thought we did.
We did. We've already under discussion.
Yeah,
Or it's on our discussion.
right.
We haven't voted on it.
So the motion.
It was just that we were going to, unless you had more.
Gotcha. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, okay. Roll call, please.
No.
Member Tupcott,
No.
member Henderson,
No.
member Mark Johnson.
No.
Thank you. Then as a follow-on motion with regard to tax lot 001.271.21, there a motion to change the assessment based on the assessor's recommendation from a total, it's a adjustment to the building value from 247, 200 to 125, 500, and the land value of 7,000 remains the same.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. Member Henderson, Member Piscoya. I think the assessor already spoke to this, so any further questions? A roll call, please.
Member Tomcott,
On this-
Sorry, can you clarify the motion one more time?
Yeah, on this one here, the assessor is recommending a new number after going through a review and a recalculation. And so this motion is for the Board of Equalization to actually accept the new number as proposed by the assessor.
Gotcha, thank you, yes.
Member Henderson,
Yes.
Member Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Member Piscoya.
Yes.
That's 4. That motion passes. That brings us to item K, an appeal for a tax lot 001.411.23. Appellant John Bachman for a portion of lot 44 in block 57. The assessed value, land was 22,600, the building of 329,000, for a total of 351,600. The appellant did not provide any other values, but did provide a letter that compared the residential properties to others in the area and noted a disparity in assessed value. The appellant is here, and the assessor did meet with the appellant.
We met last Thursday at 5:30, roughly an hour. The contract assessor, Mike Renfro, the official assessor of the city, and I met with the appellants, plural, discussed, the appeal was twofold. One was regarding the exemption, and I advised them that the assessor does not involve themselves specifically in exemption. Is for the legislative body to determine, because that's out of your code of ordinances, and it's not something that they said. The other part, as far as how assessments are calculated, we discussed that at length. The contract assessor recommended after review that no change in values be made.
Thank you. Mr. Bachman, thank you for coming to the meeting, and you may have the floor to address the board.
Hey, we're finally here. We'd like to start off with a little history snippet. Some time ago, at the time that the local elections were taking place, there was a controversy about the qualifications of a city voter who submitted a candidacy packet to the city clerk's office, and the city voter was notified she did not meet the qualifications to fill a city council seat. If I remember correctly, the city's code book was not transparent and subjective. I don't recall the outcome of this situation, but the point is that the elections chapter or section on qualifications was not clear or concise when determining a candidate's eligibility to run for a council seat. I feel this lack of transparency extends to the property tax realm as well. For the last 3 years, we've been asking questions, making requests for information, even submitted a dissertation, as a council member described it, to the city council, recommending amendments be made to the property tax chapters in this city's code book of ordinances. The amendments should make the process transparent and that the procedures are set in place for anyone new who comes into the assessor job, the city clerk job, and as a new city council member, what assessment principles and other methods are used to assess property. This is what section 17.20.010 property taxation states. Unless otherwise provided in this chapter, the city shall assess for, levy, and collect real property tax and personal property tax and enforce personal property tax in accordance with Alaska statutes. The city shall enforce delinquent real property tax liens through foreclosure proceedings conducted once every 2 years. The exemption section is not clear as well. The sections on exemptions in the code book goes over what is exempt and who is eligible, but doesn't go over how the exemptions are determined and is subjective. For example, this is what the code states on improvements. Improvements to real property, if an increase is assessed, value is directly attributable to new maintenance, repair, or renovation of an existing structure. And if the maintenance, repair, or renovation, when completed, enhances the exterior appearance or aesthetic quality of the land or structure, no exemption may be allowed under this subsection for the construction of any improvement to a structure, and the principal purpose of the improvement is to increase the amount of space for occupancy for non-residential use within the structure. When determining our exemption, the city clerk and city assessor disagreed on whether or not we qualified for an exemption and what is considered exempt, interior or exterior. If city officials are not sure about the exemptions, then property taxpayers won't know either. There's a reason for our appeal on the application. The first reason for our appeal is that it is not clear how the city calculated either the exemption or improvements amounts. Neither in Nome's Code of Ordinances, sections 17.20020 or .030 establish a transparent, consistent, or equitable process for the city to use to determine the property exemption amounts for residential properties in Nome. As a result, property owners have no way of understanding how the city makes exemption determinations. In particular, what factors the city considers when determining exemptions. The city needs to establish a transparent and consistent process for determining property exemptions. And it needs to make the process available to the public. The second reason for our appeal is that the amount of improvement assessment is excessive. Our residential property is assessed at $329,000 for a 1-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 1,200 square foot structure. Other comparable residential properties in our area, Belmont Point, lower assessed value. $272,200 assessed value for a 2 to 3 bedroom, 1 or 2 bath. $254,700 assessed value for a 3 bedroom, 2 bath renovated construction, and $95,400 assessed value for a 1 bedroom, 1 bath new construction. The disparity in the assessed value for these comparable properties suggests that the improvement assessment amount the city assigned to our property is excessive compared to the city's assessed value for other residential property in the area. The lack of a clearly discernible policy, code provision, or standard that the city uses to assess property values makes it much more difficult for property owners to predict the assessed value of their property and to challenge the city's determinations. On 5/25, we met with the assessors and they shared the sales ratio is used to assess properties. No sales data was provided. We asked for a copy of the assessed table we were looking at and what the next step is in the appeal process. It is still not clear what assessment principles and supported sales data was used. The city should be able to articulate the assessment principles it is relying on when assessing property and what sales data is being relied on as well. As a sales ratio or comparison is used in your location, there's no home that is comparable or similar to our property that recently sold. Location, size, area, materials used, etc. Any questions for us?
Are you finished with your?
We just have one more thing, a couple more, but we just want to see if you have any questions about.
I know, one question I'm gonna have is being that you left the owner estimated value blank, what are you asking for? I understand your concepts, and I'm glad attorneys are on the line because of the code that you're questioning. And that might be something to look at some point, but what are you asking for?
Well, we're not trained assessors.
Yes.
What we're asking for is for the principles, and as a council, we've been sitting here, and that's something that's come up. You've asked for what principles have been used, what tables have been used, how are you getting this? Well, as property tax owners, we're in the same boat, and we've been dealing with it for 3 years, talking to Brian, talking to Arnie, and trying to figure that out. What we can tell you is about how much we spent on it, and then what the properties assessed, like we did here around us, or assessed at. We don't have a number because we're looking at, well, what is it exactly? I know Arn had stated he has a notebook full of a checklist. Well, that checklist he has could change anytime. So our qualm is that we need the principal assessments that could be in writing, just like your code book is here. We could come up with an amount, but we don't know what the first step would be. We have a good idea because we've done a lot of research. John's helped me, he's done the math, I've been on the computer stuff. So. But any other?
I do. I was just looking as you were speaking, and I'm reading from a handout that we got, a training pamphlet on Board of Equalization. I think it came from the AML. And it lists 4 criteria or things that appeals must establish that evaluation is either unequal, excessive, improper, or undervalued. And in looking at the definitions of that, I looked under unequal. And if you don't mind, I'll just read this real quick. And to prove that it, or to make a claim that an assessment is unequal, it says to show that an assessment is unequal, the appellant must show that there are other properties in the same class as the property being appealed, and that there is no basis that would justify different valuations of the property. And correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that there are other houses that are either in the same class or a smaller class that are valued differently.
Well, what you're looking at is from your training. What we're looking at is from the code.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about that, and when you're giving the definition,
Yeah.
we look at what's in the code.
I
And
understand.
so when you have that definition, maybe it should be in the code book, and then we could take a look. But the properties in our area, you know, there's no property that's going to be like our property. Location or the size and so forth, and all the materials. It's an older home, you know, there's some older homes. It's just not, what we can provide you is similar as best as we can, because these are 2 to 3 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 1 bedroom. We have 1 bedroom and 1.5 bath, and we have large living areas. So it's at 1,200 square feet, or foot, anyway. But we don't know what these are, how many square feet the properties that we listed, unless we go out and measure.
But you found basically the closest you could come up with to try to make and I think it's a fair argument to make. And I would just be curious as to what the assessors had to say, and maybe even the attorneys, if they feel that this is a claim based on the assessments being unequal.
That, and we would really like everything to be in the code book, and principal values, and not rely on property owners to ask the assessor, how would I know how to ask Arn for this table or ask for this checklist? I don't know if he knows if he's a property owner, to ask Arn for this checklist of everything that, you know, in regards to assessments that they look at. And I'm assuming he's a property owner. I'm sure Cheryl is a property owner. We just wouldn't know when to ask that. And that's part of our qualm, is that it's not clear. We get different answers. You know, and every time we bring it up, it's on us, which is fine. And we know that council wants to make as much money as you can. We can't, you know, you're here to provide services, but as property owners, we need to be able to be treated fairly, all of us, in regards to assessments.
I agree. It's very difficult, I mean, because I know square footage plays into this. And Arnie, do you have?
Yes, when we're assessing, and I've tried to point this out to everyone, we use a standard manual developed by the firm Marshall Swift / CoreLogic. And all they do is research per square foot values throughout the world. And they come up with tables by classification. For the most part, bigger properties are average in quality when you compare them to their neighbors. So that, and in using this menu, if we had 5 houses in a row, all 1,200 square feet, we would use the same per square foot value to value each one initially. Then we also have to look at their outside construction. There is a difference between T111, vinyl, metal, wood shakes, a whole thing. So there's that part. There's the age. There's the physical condition of it. So you're not going to have, for example, let me go down to average. If we had a one-story average house of, let's say, 1,500 square feet, that would be 9,250 a square foot is where we start. To give you the difference in values per square foot, at 1,000, it would have been 99.50, so $4 more. At 2,000, it drives to 87.50. So as things get larger, it's more efficient to build them, time and materials, and so the unit costs go down. So initially we start with a base price, and we look at the siding. We do not value things by bedrooms or bathrooms. We're doing everything from an exterior view. This is the difference between an assessment and an appraisal. In an appraisal, they come inside, they see everything about the place. We do not see that from an exterior view. The only time that we would see that is if a property owner invited us in or appealed, as in this case. And then we have what's called the local multiplier. Marshall Swift establishes their value at some point in the United States, so that a 2x4 at this point costs $1. What does that same 2x4 cost in Nome? We think that it costs $3. We use a local multiplier of 3. For example, Anchorage is at 1.26. Cordova, Wrangell, Petersburg, I believe are all at 1.6. So it varies as you go around the state. There are slopes. We have some that are 5, we have some that are 6 as a local multiplier. The last thing that we do, and this is what's called the sales ratio. Every year we're required to file a report with the state assessor. And a part of that is the sales ratio, where this is a non-disclosure stage, so you don't have to tell me what you purchased your house for or what you sold it. So oftentimes you see deeds, $10, another valuable consideration. But generally, but We're lucky enough in most communities to maybe get 30 or 40 actual sales per year. And we take the actual assessment, we compare it to the sales price. Ideally, one would equal one. By state statute, 29, 45, 110, we are required, the assessor shall assess property at its full and true market value as of 1 January of a year. The full and true value is the estimated price that the property would bring in the open market. Estimated. And so we say, okay, when we measured the sales ratio in Nome for the previous year, we were in the mid-70s. How can we close that gap somewhat to bring it closer to one? We determined that we would raise improvement value only 15%. This would bring it up closer, and I cannot tell you to what percent, but it brought it into the 80s. So the sales ratio is used primarily not as an initial valuation technique, but as a measurement of performance. And then we use it to determine how perhaps we are going to raise the assessed values, or if we were over a sales ratio of one, how we would determine to lower values. I don't know if that was clear, but I hope it was. So there's a whole variety of things that go into it. But the starting line is everybody is judged on what they have by the same set of principles. Could this be codified or codified? Marshall Swift updates probably residential values at least once a year. So every year we would be changing your code to have the most recent values. And then you'd have to determine how, are you going to adopt the whole manual by reference or just portions of it?
Talking to Arn, when you talk to us, that's a lot of information. And I think from what we're looking at from the council is the principal assessments that you need in your code book. You know, talking to Arn with all what he said, you know, I need to look at something in writing, but also I can hear what he's saying about we don't go in there and see, we don't see the interior, we don't see the number of bedrooms. You know, that's part of a principal assessment. What is it that you're looking at? You just need the basics, right? I don't think you would need something that extensive, but we're just looking for, or at least John and I as property owners are just looking for what are the principal assessments that are being used, and that's the basics. You know, I'm not an assessor, and that's not gonna make sense to me. And that's part of the problem. In addition to, we're looking for the sales data. If you're looking at sales data to assess our home at $329,000, what other homes in our area? We want to see that proof. Show us what it is that showing us in that area, those sales data, the sales ratio, which we're missing.
It's a really good point. The assessors utilize, they attempt to get sales value, recent sales data from lots of different sources.
In the last year.
Right.
That's
But
one
are you allowed to disclose those or publicize those of recent sales data that you're using to justify? I think that's the question.
that and also principal assessments.
Are you bound by certain privacy rules to?
In some cases, see now, Mike Renfro, as the contract assessor, is allowed access into the multiple listing service. And so he can legally find values and utilize those and make a list. Also, I rely on deeds of trust. You heard an earlier appeal tonight. And so we can take a deed of trust, say a deed of trust for $400,000, and we'd make an estimate, okay, the sales price or purchase price was perhaps 10% above that, because you gotta put some money down, generally. So we rely on that. As a, you know,
But if you, I guess the question I've gotten,
John and Lena have pointed out their house, as many others, is unique. There's nothing else like it.
In the location that it is in.
And there's a home down on, now their home is 1,200 square feet. There is a home that's 1,250 square feet down the hill from them on Belmont. 1,250 square feet that just sold at $499.
If that's the one down the hill, that has two buildings to it. I just looked at that. I looked at that value, I looked at online whether that was sold. And I was like, man, that's really a lot of money. I could take what Arnie's saying, but then I look, oh, wait a minute. There's a 2-story building out right behind it that they could use for a garage. I don't think I think that's the same property you're talking about, so. It's not the same as what we have.
Finally,
If there's no more questions.
And they've got, a sale of 1,000 square feet, which is roughly 1,200 less than those. No garage, $320,000.
Where's that at? Where's that?
I can't tell you specifically because I didn't write that down. But there are throughout the community sales,
Which we haven't
but
seen.
there is nothing is going to be exact.
Yeah.
And that's why it isn't the comparable sales are, yes, certainly a part of the process, but we don't rely on them to hit the original value. We do that strictly by a manual and then determination of physical condition, age, and all those factors. And make an estimate. And then, as I say, we measure the overall performance by the sales ratio.
I think our main
Sales.
problem is, sorry, Mayor. I think our main problem is that principal assessment, the sales ratio that wasn't shared, that what's in the code book is, especially how properties are valued, and then the exemption part, which there's a disagreement about who gets an exemption and how much. If there's no other questions, I think John has one more thing, but I think the mayor wants to.
No, I guess with regard to the 30 or 40 sales to determine the sales ratio, that ratio applies universally throughout town. It's not based on area.
It's specific to Nome. For example,
When you're
the
talking
sales
about-
ratio here was mid-70s. The sales ratio in Cordova was 62.
But
And I had a lot of appeals there too.
a house in Icy View and a house on East End and a house up on West Fifth Avenue, all of those sales that happen in Nome all get glommed into this ratio. So that, it's not looking at just, what may have happened on Belmont Point,
Yeah.
would be subject to
Exactly.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the 3 types of assessments, which the sales ratio isn't, but you've got the sales comparison for sales of home in your location. You've got, the other one was income method, you could do that, and then the cost approach. So those are 3 ways that we've learned since going through this whole thing of how properties are assessed. And then talking with Arnie about how, those principal assessments, which we're missing and not finding. And the sales ratio, I don't think is the cost method or the sales method to assess property. The sales
It's the
method.
cost
is a little-
approach.
Yeah, sales method is a little different, so.
How old is your property?
well, I think the house is built in 1950. And then finally, as we've been going over this with assessors and our city clerk for 3 years, one thing we did not notice until now, is based on the table used by the assessors, there appears to be an error in the calculation of the old and new addition to our home. Read the table. one other recommendation besides,
That was my note to him.
oh.
He's a better reader than I am. Table is on your, that one, assessment information that we get from Aaron. I don't know if it's your packet. Talk about that.
Yeah, so the new addition to our house is 384 square feet. And they inadvertently applied 42% good to that, whereas it should have been applied to the 816 square feet of the old portion. So they just kind of put the percentages in the wrong place.
If you have a copy of that. It's on the third page,
We don't.
the third page of our book, or the little property card that we got. I don't know if Aaron gave that to everybody or not. But
So it sounds like maybe the conversation between you and the assessors may not be finished.
Well, we were done. I don't know if you want to pass that around. This is the section.
Sure.
But we were done.
So I guess-
We weren't able to, asked for that card right there that you're looking at.
Mhm.
And so he sent that, one of the clerks sent that out to us. We were waiting for a call back from the assessor, and we got a call back this afternoon. So we weren't able to talk to him again. And we just found that out with that card, about that reversal in those amounts, so.
So I guess my question was, is Mark, or Councilmember, or Member Mark Johnson indicated you didn't have an owner's estimate of value in here. So I guess the question is, and there were notes on the appeal form that you were still supposed to meet with the assessor. So my question is.
Yeah, we did, on the 25th, we did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he was supposed to call us back.
So I guess the question is, do you wish to appeal the assessor's recommendation of the
Leaving it
assessor?
the same? Yes, because of what we just provided in regards to recommending to the council to make it clear about the principal assessments for everybody. And then also changing the exemptions, make sure, because we feel like we were chipped out of that exemption because two people couldn't agree how we got one. And that was 2 years ago. We couldn't make it to the meeting, and we couldn't talk about that. But, those things should be settled for people property owners, so they know how your property is being assessed. Whether it be a checklist from a notebook or this big manual. But we're still disagreeing with it because of this. Also, this one, I think that's the main thing you're going to have to vote on is there's an error here. It makes the difference in regards to our assessed value, which is more reasonable than 329,000.
So on that document you just shared with us, there's some handwritten numbers on the right-hand side. Are those your numbers?
Yes,
Yeah, those-
that's the way it should have been calculated.
So those numbers, can you tell us what those are?
Yeah.
Basically, we have a land value of 22.6. Are you debating that?
No, we don't know how to,
Okay, we have a
we don't know how
building,
to debate that.
okay.
Once we learn, we might come back.
We have a building value of 329,000. And I assume then you're appealing that building value.
Yeah, because we come up with 243,789.42. If you switch that 100% over to where the 42% is and the 42 where the 100% is.
What is the 42%?
What's that?
What's the
Can
42%?
you clarify what this 42%?
Depreciation, age depreciation.
Okay.
He inadvertently depreciated the brand new structure to saying it's 42% good, whereas that should have been applied to the old structure.
I need a point of clarification here, because when the addition was picked up, what is the old house?
The 816.
So you added.
384.
From the original house, you added a portion of new house.
Yeah,
On top of it.
right, 384
Okay.
square feet.
All right. And
So
at that time that you added the second story, did you do any remodeling of the original.
Yeah, we
Okay.
remodeled the
The
original.
816? Yeah.
So that's probably when he was calculated, they picked up the remodel and the addition to the second floor and considered that to be the new portion. And the single portion of the single story was calculated as the original structure without remodel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the new portion was calculated as the old portion. And the old portion was calculated as a new portion. Is that what you're saying?
What's on our
You
agenda?
had a house. And then you added a second floor here. So you had an original portion of 384 and
No. Original portion of 816.
modeled. Let's take the single story part.
Yeah.
Okay, that's original house, and that's what, okay, and then you added a new portion on top of this, and below it, you remodeled it. It is not the original, say, 1950s house, correct?
No,
It
there's
is
still,
different now.
yeah, it still has.
So
it
it
has
was
bones.
calculated probably as a portion of the new house, and that's why it's calculated at 100%.
I thought the argument was, the 42% was because it was an older structure, whereas 100% was because it was a newer structure.
Yeah.
So the percent good for the 100% good should apply to the brand new structure, and the 42% good should apply to the renovated structure.
Okay. The second story is new, so that
Correct.
should be calculated at 100%.
That's correct.
When that's
The
only-
single story that remains, just the single story portion of the house, is the original house, which we are calculating at 42%.
Correct.
Then you have this other half of the original house that's been remodeled. It's certainly not at 42% because it has been remodeled. Its value or its whatever has been increased through the remodel.
What we're saying is that you reverse that percentages.
Yeah, that's all we're saying.
So really, what I should be doing here is calculating this at 42, the upper story at 100,
No.
and the lower portion at somewhere of adding the original and the remodel here and saying, okay, instead of this being, say, 100 years old, this portion is now only 50 years old because it's been remodeled. So you will have three different percentages to calculate.
So Arnie, I guess in all of this discussion that's going back and forth, do you believe that your numbers stand? Or is there anything needing review?
I believe the property, as does the contract assessor, is worth the $351,000. If you were to have an appraiser come out and do a full-blown appraisal, our estimate that its true market value would be in that 351,000 or more range.
And you don't feel that his explanation about the shifting of the percentages in terms of the percentage, and I don't remember what you call it, for the older properties won't change that number? Is that what you're saying? 'Cause-
It could, but it could, definitely. It would be misstating and saying that no, it would not.
So,
But as far as putting it on the market, no, I don't think,
I don't think the homeowners are gonna put it on the market to find out, but.
no one is.
And I'm being flippant, but I guess the question is, he's explained, I believe, something that was a calculation potential error in looking at it, and I think you've acknowledged that that was a potential error. Are we ready to make a decision today? I guess that's the question. Or can we, I don't know if we're gonna have another day of BOE or if this is the only one. And I guess my suggestion, and I don't know what the process is, but kind of let the homeowners, discuss this further with the assessors, and then maybe there's more a possibility of a meeting of the minds. Is that fair?
The,
I don't have it in front of me. What year did you add the second story?
Otherwise, we'll be here for a while.
Good check. 20, end of 20.
We can start building in August 2019.
And you're not debating that kind of assessment part at 100% because it's fairly new.
right,
It's just that was flipped around
yeah,
based on square footage.
right.
That was what you're debating.
Well, and also we don't want to come back, so we'd like to see something in the code book where we could see what's actually being assessed, those principal assessments. And if you're using the cost or the sales or the income approach method for assessment, that all property owners should see that. And either if it's in a policy procedure in your code book, we just need to know because, you might get 147 every year if that's not clear for everybody. So, and that's part of our reform as well. Whether or not we win the appeal, that's up to the council. But, we're gonna look at it every year, say, come back, we don't understand what you're doing. And if we don't understand, we'll keep moving back.
I had a question regarding that statement. Is the book that's used for assessing, is that a public book or something that anybody
Anybody
could?
can look at it.
Okay,
Public
it
information.
could be used as a reference. Like for instance, what she's bringing up is that nothing references how that comes to be. But if that was referenced and you had a chance to go research that, to say the reference to this book and that book's available
And what the council uses.
online or whatever, that would help ease your mind, do some further research on it.
Well, the council is using nothing. The council does not do any of the assessments. We hire a professional, independent assessment firm to do this. And so nobody at City Hall is involved in setting what the assessment process or what the assessment is. They have certain standards that they must follow as licensed appraisers in the state of Alaska. And so, I guess, it's our involvement here is to see if we find any evidence to the contrary that would support us making a finding other than what they did. And so,
Well, I kind of disagree as a council, we do have the authority. In regards to you're charging property tax. And part of the responsibility of the city council is to provide that information to the taxpayers.
we provide the, we set the mill rate, but we do not set the assessments. The assessments are set by a private firm, contracted and licensed in the state of Alaska.
But as a council, you have the authority to say what you're gonna assess, the principal assessment. Like location, size, bathrooms, bedrooms, outside and so forth. The other thing, the last thing is, this thing was very helpful. Whatever this is, that recommendation is just to offer it to property tax owners so they could see what is actually, what they're looking at as well. And not say, oh, give it to them when they ask, maybe do it in the, when the email that's sent out or in the city's website or something, that they could ask for this or offer it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see the assessor's kind of doing some calculations right now where I know Scott had asked, are we going to delay this another day for the next Board of Equalization or Arnie recalculating? Can we take a 5-minute break?
Sure, that's a good idea. Unfortunately, I didn't buy enough Smarties at BFI. Okay, we only read this, we don't have any motion on it, and with the indulgence of the board, we'll move this to the bottom of the agenda to allow the assessors a little bit more time to look at it. So we will move on then.
Mayor?
Sir.
So I had a question on the other part of their application. Do I wait now? Can I say it now or ask it later?
What is the question?
So the question is, they said the exemptions, it was unclear. And I'm wondering if they had filed an exemption. And if they had filed it, did they appeal it to the Board of Equalization?
Frankly, I have no idea what the exemptions are they're talking about, and I'd have to read the whole chapter there, so.
Yes, they did apply for an exemption. It was timely, and this, I understand, is part of their deal. That I think in the first few minutes, they had two issues. One was in value and assessment methods, and the other was in the exemption and the agreement between the assessor and myself. It is my fault. I did not put the application in the packet. So, but I can provide it if needed.
Okay.
What was the exemption applied for?
At 17200030, I think it's D maybe. It's no, it's the one that has to do with the outside appearance of. Oh, okay. It's any value attributable to the outside appearance is 100. It's 100% exempt. The exemption gets 100% for the first year, 75, 50, 25. And they're the second people that I've ever seen apply. Greg Smith is the.
Basically, not increasing the square footage, it's just painting the building or something.
So there is an application for an exemption.
Correct.
Sounds like it was denied or?
No, it was.
No.
It was
Done completely.
Oh, it was accepted?
Yeah, last year. Last year it was.
Okay.
And it's, speaking with Arnie didn't think that he should get the exemption. Arnie would have denied the exemption.
Okay.
And I tried to value it as $50,000 as to what was attributable to the external appearance. And so last year it was $50,000 off. This year it's $37,500. Next year it's $25,000. The year after that it's $12,500.
This is part of the, I'm going to jump in. Now, this part of the problem that we have is that with the exemption amount, there's the, Brian read it differently when he did it. He was only considering the outside exterior, which does not.
And we
say
figured
that
that the
talks about the
old section with
and that
remodel.
improvement affected the outside appearance. No matter how much we spent on an improvement was not considered. We spent, I think we calculated $175,000 and brought to Brian's $50,000. And that's what we try to point out, that that's not how it's reasoned.
My reasoning was that they were increasing living space, and all of that value was not at the outside.
That's not how it's.
Enhances the exterior appearance or aesthetic quality of the land or structure. Anyway, we're going to put this to the bottom of the table. Oh, Brooks, just speak up, Brooks. Don't use that feature, please.
Oh, you mean I have permission to butt in? Okay.
Yes, please.
I, I just wanted to say that if there is indeed an appeal from the denial of an exemption, that the record material that I have seen does not reflect either the original application, and the basis for the denial of the exemption. And so that really should be supplemented to the record. We did this last year, and if there's time to do that, because the BOE is going to meet for a second evening, that really should be done so that we have a complete record of what these particular property owners are asking the Board of Equalization to do, and the board has the, sufficient evidence to make a decision on it. Also, just one more point, some of these random comments, people really should get close to a microphone because these things eventually get, potentially get transcribed. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Clerk?
For point of clarification, I did not deny the exemption. I approved the exemption. It's the amount that is an issue, it's not a denial.
It was the amount of, did you hear that, Brooks? The amount of the exemption was the.
Yeah, but that actually proves my point, which is where is the information as to what happened that should have been in the written record that was before the BOE, before this hearing?
Okay.
Even if it's last year's application?
Last year's application? That decision was made last year and was not appealed at that point?
So somebody is trying to appeal a 2022 exemption decision in 2023? That appeal would not be timely.
We had submitted something to the clerk and mentioned to the clerk, we considered it an application. And no one told us that as part of that application, that we have to make an appeal to that exemption amount. We were working on an appeal to our property assessment. We saw the exemption amount, and it was my error to believe when you submit an application, and we had submitted this to the council, when we submit an application, you hear back on that application. We submitted an exemption application, we never heard back. Never heard back about that. And so, once we got that exemption amount in there, I was gonna go back and say, hey, how do we don't agree with this. But then we heard, Kirk had said it's too late for that. You missed the deadline to appeal that, and that's it, that's all, you didn't push it anymore.
Okay.
Because for us to figure out it's an application, just like a P2P, somebody's gotta tell you what's gonna happen to that application.
I believe this body has already established that the notice of assessment showing an exemption or lack thereof is sufficient notice to the taxpayer. We did so last year. And I believe that you appealed, the appellants have appealed last year and came to an agreement and signed off on it with Mr.
Okay, item K is moving to the bottom of the agenda. Moving on then to item L. This is tax lot 001.181.31. And the appeal is based on no improvements were made to the property. Mr. Assessor.
We recommend that the building value be reduced from 400,300 to 334,900. we made several attempts to contact the applicant or appellant by phone. There was no response. Also, you will note from the write-up that we provided 3 comparable sales for the assessor did that clearly supports the value or the recommendation. So we would ask that this be approved, or the recommendation be approved.
Thank you. We have the appeal of tax lot 001.181.31. Is there a motion to grant appellant's request?
I'll make the motion.
Second. Council, Member Henderson, Member Mark Johnson. Is there any discussion?
So just for clarification, if we want to accept the assessor's recommendation, we have to first decline the appellant's appeal with one motion, and the second motion would be to approve the assessor's recommendation.
Correct.
Okay.
Rather than convoluted.
If I did that, sorry.
Okay, did we had a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, a roll call, please.
The motion was to grant the
That is correct.
Member Mark Johnson,
No?
Member Piscoya,
No.
Member Topcock,
No.
Member Henderson.
No.
Thank you. As a follow-on, we have a recommendation from the assessor to revise the building numbers as he just explained. That would change the value of the buildings from $400,300 to $334,900. Is there a motion to accept the assessor's recommendation?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Member Mark Johnson, Member Henderson. Any discussion? A roll call, please.
Member Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Member Piscoya,
Yes.
Member Topcock,
Yes.
Member Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you. Then MNOPQ are gone, which brings us to R at page 61. This is an appeal for tax lot 001.101.13B. Thomas and Diane Oklisic for lot 6 of lot 86. The total assessment is $500,700. And that includes $38,500 for land, $462,200 for building. The owner has suggested a value of the land of $20,000, a value of the building of $415,000, for a total of $435,000. Mr. Assessor.
I spoke with the appellant via phone, explained that I was recommending an adjustment from $462,200 to $424,100. On the structure, recommended no change to the land value, very consistent with the community. For a total assessed value then of $462,600, down from $500,700. He did not accept that. I went by his house, discussed it with him a little bit more. He said, yes, I will not accept that. And it's before you. I'm asking that my recommendation be upheld. If we're talking about sales, in that how the house is 1,652 square feet with a 68 square foot garage. Got sales, 1664, which is 12 feet larger for 495. We have a 1575 square foot with no garage at 460 as a listing. And we have a sale of 1,565 square feet with a 240 square foot shop at 495. Will these do support the recommendation?
Thank you. Is there a motion to grant the appeal for tax lot 001.101.13 Bravo?
I'll make a motion.
Member Henderson, member Mark Johnson, is there any discussion?
I have a question, Mr. Assessor. The appellant quoted the average cost of a home in Alaska. I assume that's a statewide average. Does that factor into any of your calculations in determining assessment for Nome?
I don't know how that number is arrived at. I don't know how it's averaged out. I do not think, well, I can know my opinion is that I don't think that you can build anything in this city for $186.53 a square foot. Except maybe a shed.
Only question. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot, did we do a motion? No? We did. Oh, yes, thank you, Council, or Member Henderson and Member Mark Johnson. If there are no further questions, a roll call please on granting the appeal as requested. And if that fails, we would have a follow-on motion to change at the request of the assessor.
Member Piscoya,
No.
member Topcock,
No.
member Henderson,
No.
member Mark Johnson.
No. Thank you. That then brings us to the second question, and that is the recommendation from the assessor that the building value be reduced from $462,200 to $424,100 on tax lot 001-101.13B. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman, Member Henderson, Member Piscoya. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Piscoya,
Yes.
member Topcock,
Yes.
member Henderson,
Yes.
member Mark Johnson.
Yes. Thank you. Item S is off the agenda. Moving to item T. This is tax lot 001.161.29. Patrick Dwayne for lot 5A, block 50 in the Nome town site. The assessment of the building is $214,800. The owner is estimating a value of $40,000. The land value was $16,000, and the appellant did not contest that value. Mr. Assessor.
I met with the applicant or the appellant about a month ago here in the council chambers. We discussed the appeal. We went over using the scale that I use for percentage of completion. We had valued it at 42% initially. I reviewed the unit value, the per square foot value. I reduced that. I reduced the percentage of completion to 37%, and that gave me the recommended value of $129,293, rounded to $129,300. The appellant pretty much was appealing the use of the local multiplier, was my understanding, but he can put that in his own words. This is a 1,280 square foot, two-story dwelling.
Thank you. Is there a motion to grant the appeal on tax lot 001.161.29 from 230,800 down to $56,000?
Excuse me, I'd like to.
Yeah.
I'm present and I would like to.
Oh, okay. Speak, please speak.
Okay. Thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Patrick Dwayne. I moved here from Fairbanks about 5 years ago, and I never thought I'd be building a house in the city, but here I am building a house in the city of Nome. I am building a 103 East Kings over by the VFW there. House is incomplete, and here I am on a learning experience of house assessment and evaluation being a homeowner. I met with Arnie, and we went over his rubric for completion and came to a value of 37% complete, which I feel is very accurate. But the value that I disagree with is the dollar per square foot, which is that multiplier is applied to. And as I understand, there are multiple methods to get to that value, one being what is the cost of new construction, in which Arnie brought the example of what's the cost to buy a 2x4, what is the average cost of it to build a home in USAville, and extrapolate. The other method being sales data, which what is available. A, you can ask people what they paid. B, the other option being deeds of trust, which are available through the recorder's office. And a third method, as an investor, what is it valued? I know nothing about this method. So I'd like to approach the square foot value of my home via those methods. I have 5 deeds of trust from the last, I pulled these a month ago. We have, and again, these are the bank loan values that is publicly disclosed. So in the end, you can figure maybe it was a 10%, a 15% down payment to be applied to them. 212 East Kings Place. It was a total of $310,000 at $293,000. And again, you have to figure out square footage. I went over there, just kind of counted plywood panels, and knock on doors. Hey, can I go in your house and measure it? But that's it's approximately 1,800 square foot house. It's 1.5 stories. Comes to $163 a square foot. Here's the relevant pages of the deed of trust and a picture of the house. This place, I've picked it up a couple times. It's a trailer house attached to a 2-story. It sold for $292,000 minus $52,000 for a lot. That's a $240,000 structure. Approximately 1,700 square feet, $141 a square foot. This place over there on the end of Kings by the park that's under institutional control for Mercury and whatnot. Irrelevant though. 110 Warren Place. It was approximately $408,000 for the structure, $200 a square foot. Oh, one of our police officers' old homes. Structure, $239,000, $133 a square foot. That was 212 East 3rd. Oh, the old Oxford building. This is 400 West First. It looked like it was apartments A and B. Kind of hard to estimate square footage. I think I came up with 2,100 square feet at the structure value for $296,000. And again, all these values could have up to 10 or 15% added. Averaging all those values, we believe it comes to an average of $179.40 a square foot. So about $180 a square foot. And then another piece, so here's my building permit. You have to pay for a permit to build a house in this town. I received it approximately coming up on 2 years ago. The the building permit cost is estimated on the value of the building you were building. And that's based off of a 2012 building valuation from ICNO with a 130% multiplier. And so I had, actually originally this is for a 1,300 square foot building, and it came to $159 a square foot is what the cost that I ultimately paid my building permit upon. And so if we go to, what does it cost to build a house in Nome? Well, I don't know, I'm kind of cheap, I scrounge materials, and so that, my original value, 40,000, was the material, because I'm doing all the labor. But, okay, if, as a contractor, you figure that, I don't know, you know, it's, labor's probably about the same amount as materials if you have to replace a sink in someone's house or a drive line in someone's truck. You know, it's a nice, easy way to estimate a job for somebody. So, okay, so maybe we're $80,000. And then, as Arnie pointed out, the 2x4 example. Builders wants $11.95 for an 8-foot 2x4 right now. That's before tax. You can go to Northland Wood. They're cutting them in Fairbanks. You can buy them for $4.83. I don't know what you're going to spend on shipping, but again, it's Nome, a good way to figure everything. You know, you go try and buy a bag of chips at Costco, it's $5. You buy the bag of chips at AC, it's $10. So it's about, you know, I think is the building multiplier value of 3, I think is probably closer to 2.3. 2, you know, as you said, Anchorage was 1.2. I don't know what, and you know, it's a 2x4. You have to look at a lot of data to really figure out their value. But what all this leads back to is that it costs about $180 a square foot to build, and that's what there's 5 houses that have sold for that value. And so if we calculate $180 a square foot times my house of 1,280 square feet, it's $230,400 completed value times 37% complete, 0.37, comes to a little over $85,000. So I would like to revise my $40,000 figure to $85,000. That's it.
You quoted a cost of $180 a square foot.
Yeah, and
For your cost to build it based on you building it. And again, I'm not disputing it, but when you look at contractor built structures, the numbers I've heard are around $600 a square foot, new construction.
Wow. I remember when COVID first came around, there's, so the first assessment I had, I believe I was valued at near $400 a square foot. And I remember when COVID first started, you know, I used to listen to the radio a lot, and there's Alaska Public News thing on assessments for building in villages coming up on $400 a square foot. And that was 2 years ago, and how it was just blowing numbers out of the water. And I think, you know, it's Arnie's base value for building a house, I would think, is to have someone else do it, which is $90 a square foot, is about what? 91.
Before the multiplier.
Before the multiplier. And so a multiplier of 2 and change, 2 is, you know, I think the multiplier of 3 is, I'm sure you could spend spend that much on building a house. You could spend $600 on building a house. You can spend less and have a worst case house, but you know, at this point, it's like it's an unfinished house. You don't know what it's going to be. It's a pile of sticks and it's material. So I think.
Do you agree that I think you said you did. You agreed with Arnie's assessment that it's about 37% complete.
The assessment sheet isn't quite tailored for Nome. You know, they put a huge amount of money into the utilities and sub foundation. There's hardly any houses that have, you know, a dug foundation. And so I think you'll have to, it's maybe 13%, 10% for the foundation. I'm not sure.
Foundation and slab is 6%.
6%.
Of the total.
Okay.
6% of one of them.
Does state, obviously you're doing assessments and appraisals based on what's required of you in state statute, correct?
Yes,
And I assume that methodology you use in the Marshall and Swift's guide or whatever it's called is what is required or recommended in state statute. Is that correct?
yes.
Which, yeah, there's no contest for the percent completion. I feel like every time I stand there and think about what I'm gonna do next, I'm like, all right, 37%. Sweet. You
You're just disputing the cost.
know, the estimated, the cost per square foot. And I think earlier the board on one of Martinson's first or Centurion's first appellants that came to at his appealed value or the assessor's revised value is $199,400 for a 1,352 square foot building. That's $176 a square foot. And you know, you measure the square footage on the outside, the inside, there's a lot. Say nothing's exact, but a lot of thinking that I do keeps coming to about 180 a square foot.
And what is the cost that you used per square foot? What does that come out to?
I've got it at, what, 273?
273.
Times that $91 state number, or where's the $91 come from? The
The 91 came out of the manual.
out of the manual.
Yeah.
It's a
Two-story.
two-story X type of siding. I don't believe, maybe there's more.
And you use your multiplier.
We used the multiplier we use for everything up here, 3.
So you're basically, if I understand your argument correctly, you're wanting to base the assessment on what you feel you can do it for. what you can build it for,
Not entirely. I mean, I've come at
versus the number that the assessors have used. Is that because
Well, in
you
that case, it'd be
indicated-
$40,000 because I'm not paying myself. I'm losing money, so I might as well be a negative value.
It's your sweat equity.
Yeah, sweat equity. So yeah, that would be the case of.
But I'm just trying to, I'm not just arguing at all, I'm just trying to understand your argument is basically you feel that you can do it or get it constructed for a cheaper cost, a lower cost per square foot than what the assessors are saying it's worth.
I believe you should be able to hire a prudent contractor to do it for that value.
For $180 a square foot.
That's part of his argument, but the other part of his argument is that he used comp sales to come up with that
And it's
So completed properties.
on completed aged properties.
yeah, it's
And I don't know if that pile made it back to Arnie.
Oh.
There.
Well, those are based on deed of trust on,
They're based on completed value.
yeah. Yeah. And then doing the calculation on the square footage of the house.
Percentage.
So I don't know how many of those may or may not be in the ratio already, but
and Arnie might have different values for square footage.
What we don't know about these, or how old are they? We don't know their physical condition. We don't know the quality of construction. What the unit value was. Well, we have a unit value that that Mr. Dwayne has provided. But, you know, the age of the structures and their physical and their quality of construction is a lot of, of concern. The things that as assessors we have to think and work in. Do we say that this is of average quality? I won't tell you which one, but I did have an appeal under this bunch. And, quality of construction was not there. So I think comparing older structures with something that's brand new, probably is not a good idea because we have a lot of unknowns.
And at this point, the house
I
is,
think when you look at our sales ratio and us being low, that even our multiplier of 3 may well be lacking.
And
Wrangle right now, Martin's pointed out, Wrangle right now is about $400 a square foot to build. And they are an ice-free, year-round access. People can bring barges up from Seattle. They often do. Let them get together and buy their materials and bring them up on the barge and then construct.
And is it fair to say that the methodology that you use to determine this value, the percentage of completion, is the same that you used on all of your partially finished structures?
Yes, I would use the same scale going down the
Same
percentages.
multipliers, the same.
I did it with a couple of the former appeals tonight. Used the same set of guidelines.
And refresh my memory, we lowered it from you're recommending lowering it from the original assessment of 230 total, or buildings of 214,800 down to 129,800, based on, you thought it was farther along from outside, looking on the outside.
We estimated, when we picked it up initially, we estimated, okay, where will it be at the end of the year? Because that's when we determine things is on the 31st, so that on the 1st of January, what exists, and we're not here on the 31st of December. And also I went back and I thought that possibly the unit value was too high, so I did take that down. Initially, we had it calculated at 300 and right at $400 a foot. And I thought the 273 was probably more reflective of the quality, size, and that type of thing.
And based on your calculation you just did, when you were up there, you said you changed your appeal amount from 56 or 40 to 85?
for the structure, yes.
The structure from 40 to 85, which would put your total value,
I believe
10,
land was 16 and change.
85 plus 16,
101.
101. Is that correct?
I don't have the,
Okay.
15,950, yes.
We're 101,000, and the assessor is recommending 145,800. I just want to make sure we got the numbers.
Yeah, I don't have them in front of me with the
Yeah.
land value added, but I trust your math.
Okay, I just want to make sure we got the numbers right. So, assessor's recommending 145,800 total value, and you're appealing it for 101,000.
Correct.
What questions I got? All good.
Okay.
Mike?
All right, anything further?
I believe I presented all my thoughts.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for sitting through all this.
You guys, the assessors have anything else to add?
If I can add just a quick thing, I've had lots of appeals in Wrangell Valdez, where we probably can agree the cost to build might be a little bit cheaper. And what we are seeing now is that also, at some point, maybe now we're kind of even, but at some point, actually, it was more expensive to build something than to buy a home that's already built. And that's meaning that you have to buy a land, install all the utilities, kind of start from scratch. If you would have to start from scratch, that will cost you more actually to build a house than actually to buy a house that's already ready. And so looking at the cost that for the homes that have been sold, eventually, yeah, you might see that the cost per square footage is a little bit lower, or sometimes considerably lower than for the home to be built from scratch. And I've had costs in Wrangell. I know somebody who's building. I think the costs were around 400 per square foot. I know in Valdez last year, local builder didn't build anything, and the main reason was it would cost him more to build, let's say, 1,000 square foot home than for somebody just to buy already home that's being built, that's already built, much larger home than actually build something from the scratch. And that was the case last year in Valdez because of all the construction costs. Everything has been way higher than it was in the past couple of years. So for him to build, let's say, 1,500 square foot home would cost over $400,000, but then you could buy a house that's 2,000 square foot for $350,000. So that's kind of the difference about the cost, how much it costs to build.
So you're saying that when you build, you don't necessarily, get those costs. If you spend $500,000 to build a house, you don't get necessarily a $500,000 appraised value house.
No, and that's what we are seeing right now, that you might spend $700,000 to build a house, but you might only sell it for 4 or 5.
That's been a factor known for many, many years.
Yeah, and I know in the past, because I'm kind of looking maybe either buy or build a house, so I did all the costs, and I think, it costs right now, it probably costs more to build a house than to buy a house. It used to be that you could build a house, sell it, and make $150,000, but now it's, it has changed for quite a bit. So that's just a little comment. I wish I could build a house for $180 per square foot, which, probably could somehow with recycling materials going, filling things around, could possibly, I don't know. But that's just a little comment how what I've seen from going through a couple hundred appeals this year through different communities in Alaska, how much costs have gone up, especially to build a house.
I think in one of the previous sessions that we've had, Arnie mentioned that if you get a good deal on a house, like if you buy a house that would appraise at $400,000, but you're able to somehow buy it for $350,000, you get a deal. That doesn't necessarily translate into a lower assessment, right?
No,
No, I'm using. Would that analogy apply here? That comparison? You may be, and I'm not disputing, you may be absolutely able to build a house for.
No, it's definitely fair to say what would the average person have to spend, and they could spend this much. Maybe if they.
So you might be able to do that. You might be able to build it. I believe you 100% that you can build a house that that you kind
I
of.
believe someone will gladly take 600,000 a square foot.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily translate into assessed values. That's the
No.
That's what the point I'm trying to make.
then we would use a different set of principles to value every home in Nome. And we have to have some kind of consistency. That's why we use a manual with standard numbers.
That's the point. Thank you.
And I've seen homes that, property owners that spend, especially not here, but other communities, waterfront properties where you spend $200,000 plus for land, and then you spend another $600,000-700,000 for the house. And then I've seen them being sold for less what you actually spend building the house.
Thanks. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Okay, there are are no further questions, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have the appeal on page 65 that Alan verbally revised in section 2 from 40,000 and billed into 85,000 and a total of 101,000 versus the assessor's recomputation at 129,800 for the building. Is there a motion to grant the appeal for block, or for tax lot 001.161.29?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Member Henderson, Member Mark Johnson. Any discussion further? Roll call, please, on the motion.
Member Topcott?
No.
Member Henderson?
No.
Member Mark Johnson?
No.
Member Piscoya?
No.
Thank you. As a follow-on recommendation of a revision by the assessor, is there a motion to concur with the assessor's revision to value, no change in the land value, the building value reduction from 214,800 to 129,800 for a total taxable value of 145,800.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Member Henderson, Member Piscoya, is there any discussion? Not, roll call, please.
Member Henderson?
Yes.
Member Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Member Piscoya?
Yes.
Member Topcott?
Yes.
Okay, on a 4 vote, that passes. That moves us on to item U, tax lot 001.281.09A, an appeal by Alex Morgan for lot 6B, block 27. The 361,400 was the total assessment. The appellant suggested $310,000, and the assessors revised it to $311,300. Anyway, I guess we're in a similar situation on this, potentially 2 votes. Is there a motion to grant the appeal of the property 001.281.09?
I'll make.
Thank you, Council, or Member Henderson, Member Mark Johnson. Any discussion?
He makes the argument that his place was appraised 11 months ago at 310,000. How does that come into play with?
Well, I independently figured, revise the percentage of completion, and you'll see that we're $1,300 difference.
Right.
I felt that the appraisal was pretty reflective of it. Yes, I'm up 1,300, but the appraisal's a few months old, so
And it says here you didn't get a chance to talk to the appellant about the.
I did not. I left, at least 4 messages, and, I didn't get any response.
Okay.
So this is a completed home or under construction?
It is complete.
Oh,
No, he had an appraisal done. It's complete.
Okay, is there a motion to grant the appeal by appellant for tax lot 001.281.09?
We already made the motion.
We did?
Yes.
Okay. All right, potential follow-on then, a roll call, please.
Member Mark Johnson.
No.
Member Piscoya.
No.
Member Topcock.
No.
Member Henderson.
No.
Thank you. The assessor has revised the numbers and recommend a revision from 361,400 to a total of 311,300. That by no adjustment to land value and decreasing the building from 337,400 to 287,300. A motion to adopt the assessor's recommendation.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Member Henderson, Member Piscoya, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Member Piscoya.
Yes.
Member Topcock.
Yes.
Member Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you. On a 4-0 vote, that passes. Item V is withdrawn, which brings us to page 79 for tax lot 001 dash or dot 301 dot 03. This appeal by Farley Mobile is reduction of a building and that the building was removed and replaced. Another home on the property is owned by the National Park Service. I've managed to lose some pages here, so Mr. Assessor, what's your recommendation?
If, Mike Renfro did an extensive analysis of this one. He did speak with the appellant and stated that, he recommended lowering the improvement value from 374,500 to 245,200. The total assessed value would go from 413 even to 283,700. He spoke with the appellant and she said, I could not sell it for this. If you see the write-up, he also, this is, if you're familiar with the Noxapaga Suites on west side, this is the building. And you can see, looking at it from an income approach, he said 839,000. If you considered it from the income approach and the whole analysis there, we feel confident that the reduction to 245,200 for the improvements is reflective and a solid assessment.
Why did you use, or Renfro use the income approach versus the comparable sales?
Well, actually, he determined the recommendation using cost approach. He did the sales analysis or the income approach only to demonstrate that if you looked at this from a different approach, it would be worth even more.
Okay, so.
But to remain consistent, we can't say, okay, we're gonna do this one by cost approach and the neighbor by income approach.
So the income approach outlined here is simply to support the
Exactly,
the revised assessment based on, just like all the rest of them.
yes.
Okay, I missed that, thank you.
Because it's also, it's a commercial property and not necessarily a residence. Right, Nick? And that's the income, why you have an income approach, because it's a.
He just used that to basically
Yeah,
to
but you can't,
justify.
but you can't do that on a if they're living there, he couldn't use the income approach because there's no income. The reason you use the income approach is because this is a property that's rented out by the night.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
But he doesn't use the income approach for every commercial property.
Well, if somebody,
Mike was just using it as a demonstrator. The recommendation is based strictly on cost.
It was to support the assessment based on cost.
Okay,
And he listed some comparables there.
okay, so the assessor's recommendation and total value is what?
283,700.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion to grant the appeal for tax lot 001.301.03? With a reduction from 413,000 even to 181,167.
I'll make that motion.
okay,
Thank you, member Piscoya, member Mark Johnson. Is there a discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Piscoya.
No.
Member Topcott.
No.
Member Henderson.
No.
Member Mark Johnson.
no,
Thank you. The appraiser has made a recommendation to revise the assessment for this particular property and improvement from 113,000 originally set to a total of 283,700. Is there a motion to adopt the assessor's recommendation?
I'll make the motion.
okay.
Thank you. Member Henderson, member Mark Johnson. Is there any discussion? Roll please.
Member Piscoya.
Yes.
Member Topcott.
Yes.
Member Henderson.
Yes.
Member Mark Johnson.
Yes,
Thank you. For affirmative votes, that passes. That brings us to item X, Barron. And I know I read it online, but it doesn't look like it printed in my copy. It probably didn't print in your copy either.
probably not. I remember reading it too, but I don't remember what.
Scott, can I look over here?
Absolutely. I've already reviewed it.
Okay, the next appeal is for property 198.2.439 by David Barron for lot 8, block 11. This is out in Icy View. The assessed valuation was $50,000 for land, $305,100 for the building, for a total of $355,100. The owner proposed the building at $264,300 for a total of $314,300. And doesn't seem to understand the assessment process. Mr. Assessor.
We recommend denial of this appeal. We have it now a current assessed value of $355,100. We have a deed of trust from 2 years ago, recorded deed of trust at $359,000, which exceeds the assessed value. And it's also, if you remember a month ago, Adam Barrier, who was a review appraiser with our company, also spoke with Mr. Barron, and he paid $378,000 for the property 2 years ago. We feel that the assessed value is certainly supported. It is under the purchase price.
It appears that Mr. Barron's argument is really just the rate or the amount of the successive increase in the assessment. That seems to be where his argument or his appeal is based on. It's just the rate of increases.
To which I would argue, if we didn't have those rates of increase, we wouldn't be anywhere close to what he paid.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to grant the appeal for tax lot 198.2.439.
I'll make the motion.
Member Henderson and Member Mark Johnson, is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Topcock,
No.
Member Henderson.
No.
Member Mark Johnson.
No.
Member Pistoia.
No.
Thank you. Okay, and then that brings us back to the item that we moved down the agenda here, item K for Mr. Bachman. The clerk has provided, I'm sorry?
The motion was to grant the appellant's appeal, and it failed.
And I said it passed.
Well, being that it failed, would the next motion be to then grant the assessors?
The assessors made no change to their recommendation, to the initial was the same. So in this case, there was not a second.
Oh, okay.
The clerk did provide copies of applications here for municipal tax exemption. And was filed January 18th of 22. And one was filed January 29th of 23. There is, on this particular form, we should probably just copy it for everybody. They're very basic, and it's just application of municipal taxation, type of exemption requested, real property with the property description, and then the basis for the exemption, and that being in both, well, specifically say in 17.20.020 improvements to real property, and that the activity for the entire calendar year is residential use. Nothing on this form that discusses or outlines the amount of assessment, of an exemption, either that is requested or that is granted. But there was a that was timely filed. So I don't remember exactly what the, just need to read back here.
Arnie was doing some recalculations. I'm just curious if he came up with a potentially a different assessment based on the appellant's appeal.
Yeah.
Not really, no. So I'll just explain what I did here real quick. So I guess we agreed that 384 square foot section is a brand new section, so it's 100% complete. And then 816 is the section that was built in late 40s, early 1950.
He stated 1950 tonight.
1950, but since then it was remodeled at the same time when the new section was built, so roughly around 4 years ago. And percent complete, property owner mentioned it should be 42%. But what happens when you remodel a house? percent complete, not percent complete, but depreciation, it changes. You add, fix up roof, siding, windows, and everything. So you extend the lifetime for the property. That adds value. So what I did, I looked at our depreciation schedules. So I took in consideration that, for example, probably foundation remains the same. So foundation is over 70 years old. Same thing with the framing and sheeting. You usually don't change framing unless there's been some rot. So we assumed that there wasn't any change in framing. Property owner mentioned that there was a new roof, windows, and siding for the old section. Heating, plumbing. I assume that at some point it probably was updated. It's not original. So I did just half of full age. Full age is 74 years old for the property. So I did 37 years for heating and plumbing. Insulation usually also doesn't get changed unless there's some damage for insulation. So that was also assuming original. And then interior and floors probably were also changed at the time when the property was remodeled. So that 42%, eventually it goes up, it changes to, I have a range estimating between 70% to 77%. So the final value for the property based on that the property has been remodeled, pretty much everything's brand new inside, besides a couple of things such as foundation framing and insulation. So I have range, I came up with the numbers between 344,400 to 363,100. So it's still within the range what the property was assessed initially.
Well, it's actually assessed less.
We had 351.
Okay, so you take land into consideration in those numbers?
Yes, that was with the land, yes.
It's right in the middle.
So with what you just said and the applicant's appeal or application for an exemption, does the exemption part come into play with what your value is?
No, this value is without exemption.
So do we know the amount, what you had mentioned earlier that at this year, his exemption is a certain amount, 37.5, I think I heard you say.
So it's X minus 37.5 is the taxable value.
So what I heard you say, your taxable value came to down to 340 something?
344,400 would be the low end. 363,100 would be. So I used two manuals. I have one on computer. Arnie's using one from the book. The book manual came out at 344,400. Computer came out at 363,100. So from that value, you would take away 37.55.
And on most of what I've been hearing, we've been referring to that book as standard that most assessments are using.
Yes. So yes, Arnie is using book. I'm using computer. Eventually, they're right there. So yeah.
So do we subtract then the exception from the range that you have noted to come up with a final assessment? Is that what we're doing, or is it something?
That's what I understand. That's what I'm questioning. That's my question.
No, we would use the
The exemption goes on after
Yeah.
value.
That's what I'm saying. If we come up with a number of the value is, then we take that exemption off of that number. Okay, we come with a value and the tax assessment puts that exemption on there. So we're not determining that.
exemption.
Right, okay, I get it, okay.
So basically, any.
Well, the value of the assessment was set at
Previously. it said-
50,000, I think, and now it's 37, and then it goes down, correct?
It's exemption.
Exemption.
It's exemption, correct.
So based on your range, once you recalculated it between 344,400 and 306,900, if we recommended a tax assessment of 344,400, would that be appropriate? And I guess maybe that's an attorney question.
So the range was from 344 to 360 something?
363,100.
Yeah, 363. The reason I ask is the attorney earlier in Brooks said that if we recommended a valuation different from what the assessor's recommending, that we needed to justify it. And so I'm using your range that you have quoted to provide the 344, 400 at the low end of that range. And I guess my question to Mr. Chandler is that acceptable?
Well, that decision would be supported by the information that you just received from the assessor. And so the explanation would be, why would you decide to go to the low end of the range as opposed to the midpoint or the high end or something like that? So it certainly is something that could be supported by what's in the record. The other question, it's still unclear to me if the property owner was appealing the calculation of a tax exemption at the $35,000 level, and if so, what the reasons were and what the amount of the exemption the property owner thought should be applied to whatever the final valuation ends up being in tax year 2023.
Well, somehow I seem to recall that 50,000 was the number granted, and his wife said they valued it at 175,000.
But that was a decision that was made last year, right?
The 50,000 was a decision that was made last year. 175,000 is my understanding of what they spent on the project.
Total.
I just looked at the permit. It's 100 to 200,000 provided by the applicant.
And this is what year in the exemption
2019.
it started?
Yep.
Did they get a different exemption in previous years?
They didn't apply for the exemption
They
in
didn't
previous
apply
years.
for it. Okay.
I believe I told them to apply for the exemption.
So the other part of it is the assessor is also making some assumptions, come up with those values based on, we think that the interior may be a certain percentage. So there are some assumptions made. They are also kind of unknown assumptions. But I thought the appellant bringing that one schedule that you guys looked at, had the numbers flipped between the 42 and the 100. Was a pretty good argument, and I know you used that and tried and basically said, okay, well, we agree that we should start at 42, but because of the improvements, those should actually go, number should come up a little bit, or should come up substantially, basically.
Yes, and that was not considered in, initial review.
In the initial-
And then we changed the numbers that, the portion that's just was finished built a couple of years, 3 years ago or 4 years ago is 100%, and then the old structure, 816, we had to recalculate the percentage just based because it's been completely remodeled, which we can probably all agree that property that is completely remodeled versus property that's exactly the same property that hasn't changed in 50 years, there's definitely a value difference in those two.
So when you come up with your number as far as that depreciation number, you have something that is 0 or is valued at 100%, and then you have something that's valued at 40, and you average those two together somehow to come up with the percentage.
I recalculated percentage for the old structure. Old structure is 816, and recalculation was just based on what the property owner had remodeled in past 3 or 4 years. And that's something we do for all properties. It's mainly based on building permits that are submitted to the city. We do that every year. Sometimes, especially if it's interior remodel, sometimes there's no building permit, so sometimes we just don't know whether that's been whether property has been fixed up or not. Sometimes we have property maybe valued 150,000 and it sells for 400,000. The property actually has been completely remodeled inside. So that's something that we can only find during either appeals or if there's some other ways how we can know that.
It's not It's not unusual to spend more money on a property than what the value, doesn't, just because you spend 200,000 doesn't mean the property value goes up 200,000. Sometimes it might only go up 150,000.
Yeah, it's a return on your investment, especially, again, going through a couple hundred appeals, especially in Valdez. There's a window company from Anchorage and they replace windows for homes in Valdez. And I've seen quotes up to over $100,000 to replace windows. And it's not gonna add $100,000 to your property if you spend $100,000.
We've seen those same numbers here for people that had to replace their windows.
Yeah.
Two houses over $100,000.
And what I've said, what I've seen actually is that, you know, if property owner is looking to sell their property, they're better off actually selling it as is and then trying to spend $150,000 to $200,000 fixing it up. But that's just what I've seen. I'm not saying that somebody should sell property that's falling apart, but it is what it is now with the costs. Yeah.
We started this exercise with a value of 351,600. Taking the big range with Martin's calculations, it would come out at 353,800. So it would rise, or the value would raise $2,200. So, but whichever way you calculate it, in a way, the house is there, roughly where we determined in the beginning, but that's neither here nor there. That considered all about remodel percentages and everything.
So your recommendation is your original assessed value. Your recommendation is to keep it at the same 351,600 total?
Yes.
I would say yes. The recalculation pretty much supports what we had. In fact, it's a little bit higher.
Yeah, and the appellant really didn't come up with a number either. Right? Look at the calculations of the 42 and the 100% flip and see how that would come out, what you've now done.
They have not expressed an opinion of value. Either at the time that Mike and I met with them a week ago or tonight. They have a lot of, and they have good questions as far as how is everything calculated. I think it's valuable to discuss that.
Is there an expectation that you guys would reconvene and discuss this after you went through your calculations
I
here?
didn't discuss it with them. I thought they were staying. So,
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, I thought.
yeah,
they
I
were.
don't know. I don't know what their understanding was.
But being here 3.5 hours, I can definitely understand. So I guess the question is, should we delay the vote on it until we had a discussion with them? Because I thought they were requesting, we're making decisions here without a requested appeal number by the appellant. And I do agree that they had some very good questions to ask. And so I'm asking, is it appropriate for us to delay making this, deciding this issue until the assessors have had a chance to reconvene with the appellants to see if they've reached an agreement? Then we don't need to make any decision. If they do appeal, then because we don't really have an appeal right here. Sorry to throw the process.
The exemption thing is not, I know Brooks keeps bringing up the idea about the exemption, but that's not in this appeal either. Is that in that separate?
If you look at what's on the appeal, that's what's before you.
Okay, that's what I understand. Okay.
The, I guess, I don't know that further discussions would clarify anything with them.
We don't know that until we ask them.
Well,
I mean,
I'm not gonna make the comment that
I know we've been here for 3.5 hours. I just want to give the property owners the benefit of the doubt of,
this is not the first time they've been here on the same issues.
Understood.
Yeah, I'm gonna note here that it does say the first reason for our appeal is that it is not clear how the city calculated either the exemption or improvement amounts, which in my interpretation is they are appealing the exemption as well as the valuation. The exemption provision does two things. It starts with determining what increase in assessed value is attributable to, maintenance, repair, renovation. So that it comes up with a value, and then the property owner is entitled to an exemption based on that value, and it has a 4-year period. So the initial valuation would have been in 1 year, which I think is in the past, and then the calculation this year of 37,500 would be based on a percentage of that initial decision as to how much of the increase in assessed value qualified for this exemption. And it's unclear exactly what year we're in, what the initial increase in assessed value was based on. And it's just so that we have a clear decision on this. I think it'd be good to understand that. It doesn't appear to me that it's similar to the valuation appeal. We do not have the number you used was wrong and the number you should have used was this other number, which presents a challenge for an appeal board, because what you really want to have when you make a decision is you want to have two numbers, one proposed by the property owner and one proposed by the assessor or the city. And you don't really have that, so there's a legitimate basis to conclude that these appeals should be denied because the property owner has failed to provide an alternate number.
Looking at the, on page 44 of the appellant's form, it says the last paragraph, met with applicants on 25 May and discussed appeal. Appellant requested copies of valuation values and depreciation schedule, which appellant wants to review and then contact assessor.
Was to review.
And contact assessor. That hasn't happened. That's my point. And I guess the question is, I don't mean to throw this process on its end, but why don't we just wait till tomorrow and let the assessor have a conversation with the property owners? And if they agree, great. If not, they submit a number that they want to appeal it, and then we make a decision.
Well, it's highly unusual, I guess, in all the years I've sat here that people change their filings after the fact. That I've never seen this before.
Sorry.
What's that?
I would listen to your attorney.
Brooks?
That's just my 2 cents.
Did you have a question?
No.
I had a question on this exemption thing. What, this is the 4th year, 3rd year? Second year of when they actually applied. Is that how it's calculated then, as being the second year it's applied, it's not like we're not in a sequence of 3 and they should have applied for the other ones?
No exemption will be granted without application to the clerk.
Okay.
It's in the code.
And so what number do we use, what number did the clerk use, or did they submit that would?
John's got them and they were vague.
Yeah, there was nothing on them.
They're quite vague. They're not reading us anything. And this is, the process for the last 3 years has been vague and frustrating and circular.
So Brooks, your recommendation is that we deny the appeal based on the information we have in front of us tonight. Is that your recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, you make your own judgment. But my assessment is when property owners come before you, they have a burden of proof. And so they have to prove that the exemption was incorrectly calculated, or they have to prove that their property was improperly valued. They definitely put forward some theories about why their property was improperly valued, but I did not hear anything about why the exemption was improperly calculated.
On this form, there's nowhere that it's, where you state how much you're requesting.
Yes.
Or did I miss it?
No, there isn't.
Okay,
Yes.
so how do you make an assessment of how much to exempt if we don't have an idea of a stated value? You referenced the building permit, right?
Yeah.
100 to 200,000. They stated tonight that it costs 175.
It's the first time I heard that number.
That's
Yeah.
the first time. So you've used probably the $100,000 figure potentially.
Right.
Or just, or,
Yeah, that's 100,000, 50% of it could be directly attributed. I mean, the code says anything that is directly attributed to the exterior.
okay, so 50% would bring it to 50,000.
Improvements to real property if an increase in assessed value is directly attributable to new maintenance, repair, or renovation of an existing structure. That when completed enhances the exterior appearance or aesthetic quality of the land or structure.
When we heard tonight from the assessor that there is some kind of presumption that it did go up in value because of the improvements they made. But what we don't know is what percentage goes to the exterior, and that's where you're making a pretty good assumption that it might be 50%.
Yeah, and right now it's saying nothing it's directly attributable. I've revised my opinion.
And then two, this answers the question that we had an exemption provided in this subsection shall continue for 4 years from the date the improvement is completed, which was December of 20 on here. So if they fail to file for 2 years and now, they can only, they can only do it for, I mean, maybe now this is the last year that they can get it.
You're saying I was too lenient from starting from when they applied.
Well.
They didn't get the exemption because they didn't apply.
Get the exemption when they applied.
They did.
No,
In
when they
2022,
applied,
when they
right.
got it.
Yeah.
And they're getting it the second year, this year.
Yeah.
When, if it was starting, as John is saying, the numbers are a lot lower for the exemption, and I'm giving away too much exemption.
Okay, are we ready for a vote?
I was wondering what the process is to gain, if there is a exemption and it is denied, and we're assuming that the denial notice is sent out with the notice of assessments, what is the application process to appeal the exemption denial? Right, I get that.
They're not two separate things. There's no denial letter with the exemption. It's the assessment notice. It
Right.
says exemptions, 0.
Right.
And then from the date of the postmark, the applicant has 30 days to apply to an appeal. And then they talk to either the assessor or the exemptions.
And is it,
Typically comes straight here.
and is it this application then that they fill out for the exemption
Yes.
appeal? But there's no way in here in this application to say, I'm fine with the improvements in the buildings and the land, but what I'm saying is I'm appealing the exemption part of it.
You'll see on the agenda packet tomorrow that's just written right below, saying taxable value should be 0 based on federal preemption, sovereign immunity, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm just talking about this one that we have in front of us,
But that's where you write it, right where you were just touching.
right here,
No, above.
in here.
Yeah.
That's where you would write it.
That's where people have written it in the past.
I think that's part of their ongoing argument is that it's not clear. So they're trying to get clarity in the process. The clarity in the process, they're hoping then that their tax bill reduces based on the clarity that they gain, but they don't feel like they're gaining that clarity. And I can kind of understand why, because it's kind of vague. And it's vague on their part, but it's also vague on the city's part to have to make the assumptions, basically, that we have to make. Or that you have to make a determination based on some assumption that we don't know. So maybe that'd be something we can't really fix tonight or tomorrow night, but and maybe it doesn't need to be fixed, but it definitely, I can understand their questioning.
Is it legally allowed to delay the vote on this till tomorrow?
Yes, because you have other things on the agenda already for tomorrow, so you would,
Would it be appropriate for me to make a motion?
you would make a motion to defer your decision until tomorrow evening.
You guys support that? Okay, can I make a motion to defer the decision on this particular appeal until tomorrow and put it on tomorrow's agenda?
Okay.
Motion's been made and seconded to move the decision off on tax lot 01.411.23 to second session of the BOE on June 1. Roll call, please.
Member Henderson,
Yes.
Member Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Member Piscoya,
Yes.
Member Topcock.
Yes.
Thank you. That bringing us to the end of the agenda for this evening. Are we really adjourning or are we recessing? Thank you. The total standard recess until 5:30, tomorrow, June 1st. Thank you all for your time, dedication this evening.
Is it our intention to get through tomorrow night? Be done?
I would say it would be nice.
You're the one driving the bus.
Okay, but I mean, of what here's.
Thank you, everybody.
That's the end of it.
Thank you,
right?
Sig. 11 Norton Sounds, 1 home plate.
And that's it. We don't have another day of agenda you already.